Hey guys, welcome to Wood.Work.LIFE. On today's hand tool shootout, we're going to be taking a look at the best cordless circular saw of all time. I'd like to take a second to thank the sponsor for the hand tool shootout series, Squarespace, for making more in-depth comparisons like this possible. But more on that later. Circular saws are great, but cords are lame, right? In 2018, we don't need things like that. From brands like DeWalt, Makita, Milwaukee, and Ridgid, some awesome cordless circular saws have come out that really allow you to cut the cord more than one way. So thanks to Home Depot, they're all here for us to take a look at. But I didn't title this shootout the best cordless circular saw of 2018, did I? We're looking at the best circular saw of all time. So special thanks to my good buddy Eric over at Handtool Rescue for sending over the saw that practically started his channel. This rare 1964 Homelite XL-100. I promise I'll take good care of it, but check him out, and if you haven't already, he's linked everywhere. Let's take a look at the contenders. We have three of the best cordless saws on the market today. We have the beastly revisit of the Milwaukee Fuel M18 brushless saw. We have a special edition brushless saw from Ridgid, and a surprise last minute entrant, the brand new Ridgid Octane saw. Next, we have three 36 volt plus saws. Two of the 36 volt LXT saws, both left and right-handed grip from Makita, both using two 18 volt batteries. We also have the new DeWalt 60 volt worm drive saw. And last, but definitely not least, the Homelite XL-100. This is essentially a chainsaw with a circular saw head, just a little bit of fun. Fun fact, the XL-100 is based on the XL-12 chainsaw, which you might be familiar with from such films as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The XL-100 essentially trades the bar and chain for a base plate and arbor. The XL-12 was at the time the lightest chainsaw on the market at only 12 pounds. And Homelite also used this little motor as a generator, a drill, a water pump, and a brush hog. Eat that, batteries. You can read the full review on this little engine that could in the 1964 issue of Popular Science at the link in the description. But full reviews for the rest of the saws are on my website, Wood.Work.LIFE.com. But today we're going to test them practically head to head. So I guess it's time for a little hand tool shootout. All these saws have listed specs, but how powerful are they really? Let's test this out by seeing just how fast they can rip through an 8-foot 2x12. I'll be using Makita's new rip blades to make it even fight in the blade department with a depth of cut of 1 3/4 inches. I'll make 3 cuts and average them to see which is the fastest. I'll be pushing the saws through the wood as fast as I can without hearing the blade bind or the motor struggle. It's not exactly empirical, but we'll see how it goes. Let me know in the comments which saw you're rooting for through this test. On to the DeWalt 60 volt. This was one of my favorite saws going into this from just a non-objective hands-on experience. The worm drive saw has a lot going for it. It's an absolute beast of a saw and clearly the most powerful of these saws at 60 volts. From there, I go into testing of the special edition Ridgid brushless full-size saw until So I guess we'll be taking a look at the new Octane saw, and why not compare it to the old brushless Ridgid saw? I totally intended to leave the Diablo 24 tooth blade in the Milwaukee saw, and totally didn't accidentally compare the performance of these two blades. The Makita has probably been my second or maybe third favorite saw to actually use in this shootout. When I did my bathroom remodel last year, I brought the Makita and the DeWalt, and all the others stayed at home. It fell right in between the DeWalt and Milwaukee, that delicate balance between power and battery life. Makita really knows how to make a tool. So finally, let's finish up with a Homelite. And speaking of started, it does take just a minute to get this thing started. Does this count towards the time?
2 hours later.
I mean, does anyone really care how fast this thing can run through a 2x12? I'm freaking Leatherface! On to some general ergonomic-y stuff. I mean, the Homelite is awesome, but let's be honest, it's not at all practical or ergonomic by any of today's standards, and I would venture to say it's probably not safe. So let's leave it out of this test. Looking at the other saws though, there are general ergonomics and everyday use things to note. One thing that surprised me is all the 90-degree stops on all these saws checked out dead on square, so that's a good start. But checking the 45s, on the other hand, a couple of them were surprising. The brushless Ridgid saw was maybe a degree or so out, but I've had that one for a long time, so that might just be wear and tear. And Milwaukee omits a 45-degree detent altogether. The Milwaukee also had by far the least convenient angle gauge adjustment, and all of the other saws checked out at spot on 45. For depth of cut, they were all within a 1/4 inch of each other, but I guess that's kind of expected nowadays and with the same size blade. But the new Octane saw from Ridgid and the Makita saws led the pack with a 2 5/8 inch depth of cut at 90 degrees. The two left-hand saws have clearly visible depth of cut gauges, while the other right-handed saws had a little bit of challenges. There were a couple examples of saws that tried to innovate a little bit differently with that, but I still prefer the left-hand saw for that more visible gauge and more visible blade during cutting. In the battery department, due to the position of the shoe on all the saws, except for the Milwaukee, they're limited in battery expansion. The DeWalt is limited to the current 9 amp hour flex volt battery, which is disappointingly actually a 3 amp hour battery at 60 volt. The Makitas are limited to the 5 amp hour battery packs, but they might be able to fit a 6 amp hour battery pack, but I don't think Makita makes one yet. The Ridgid is limited to the 9 amp hour octane battery without losing any depth of cut, but I don't think a 9 amp hour battery is really holding the Ridgid back from being an all-day tool. All of these saws have an on-blade saw change tool, except for, puzzlingly, the Makita left-hand pistol grip saw. Maybe somebody in product design forgot to add it at the last minute? I thought this was kind of a standard nowadays, but it was omitted for some reason. One of the things that's frustrated me with these cordless saws, even last year, is using them to cross-cut hardwoods with a 40-tooth blade. That's why I'm going to be testing these out using a 2.5 inch thick Osage orange and hard maple sandwich at 12 inches wide using a Diablo 40-tooth fine finish blade with each of these saws to see if they bog down on the cut or get bound up or whatever it might be. We'll also take a look at the average speed, the same as before with the rip cuts, to see which one's strongest through these cuts. With such a short cut, this doesn't tell us a whole lot, but you can see where the Ridgid saw is clearly outclassed by more professional tools like the Milwaukee, Makita, and DeWalt in the group. The new Octane saw bogged down in the Osage Orange on the crosscut. I think this is a symptom of the deeper depth of cut of the newer saw. It also doesn't have a particularly bigger motor at 18 volts still. To be perfectly fair though, this is designed to be a torture test for the saw. I'm actually even more surprised that none of the other saws bogged down. Alright, so before we jump into these conclusions, I want to take just a second to thank the sponsor of the Handtool Shootout series, Squarespace. It takes a lot of time, money, and effort to bring all these tools together for these hand tool shootouts. I really want to thank them for supporting small creators and pet projects like this one. I'm actually working on a website to consolidate the timeline of significant hand planes through history, and I'm hosting it through Squarespace. It's so easy to build a professional looking site using Squarespace. You just pick a template, drag and drop photos and elements, and hit go. Is there a pet project that you want to get started on in 2019? Well, fulfill your New Year's resolution with a great new website from Squarespace. Click the link down below in the description for 10% off your first purchase and help show Squarespace what a great idea it is to continue supporting small creators like myself. Thanks. All right, so half of you are probably already gone because of the internet. Before you go backing your tribe in the descriptions, Team Red, Team Blue, whatever, let me share my 2 cents. My favorite saw going into this was the DeWalt. And I think this is because personally, I prefer left-hand blade saws for the experience. I prefer the biomechanics of a pistol grip saw, and the overall power of the DeWalt is palpable. It's evident from just having it in your hands. And these tests really just prove that out. But, and this is a big but, I don't think after going through these tests, I could recommend, for a right-handed person anyway, more the Milwaukee as an overall best of the best saw. This is because even though it was not the fastest, strongest, or best in performance amongst all these saws, is one huge advantage. It is doing what it's doing while being able to run on a 12 amp hour battery. The Milwaukee is within striking distance of the 36 volt plus tools, plus it can take a 12 amp hour battery, which gives you all day battery life with professional power. All assuming you're right-handed. By the book, this is a safer saw. It's not an end-all be-all though. The DeWalt is undeniably the strongest saw of the bunch, and overall day-to-day, it's a great saw. And the Makita saw walks that happy medium between the power of DeWalt and the battery life of the Milwaukee. The Ridgid, it's still a good saw. Both the Gen 5X brushless saw and the Octane saw are selling for $150. You add a battery to that, and you're out the door with a working tool for $220. And battery life's going to be up there with the rest of these. So these tools are fine, they're great, it's just going to be slower to work. They're not really probably something to rely on for a job site, but it's still a capable saw. The second cheapest saw in the lineup is $350. So you really need to decide whether you're going to be doing that kind of work with these tools. I hope you enjoyed today's hand tool shootout. These are a lot of fun for me to do. I really just like being able to play with all the tools and really get to the bottom of what's the best tool. I hope to someday kind of have a Mount Rushmore of tools on my wall from the winners of these shootouts over time. If you enjoy videos like this, be sure to drop a like down below. If you're not already subscribed, be sure to get subscribed. I've got probably 2 or 3 more hand tool shootouts coming out for the year. Maybe more, we'll see if you guys like these. If you're interested in more of the PC builds, I've got a couple of those coming up as well, or just the general builds. I've got a lot of cool stuff coming for just some DIY stuff. Thanks for watching today, and remember, to keep your tools sharp and keep your mind sharper.